Big g'day and welcome to another massive edition of the RDFNL Footy Show. Thanks to Ontime Delivery Solutions. Looking back on the latest round of excitement. My name's Andy. I'm joined by Tara Murray. Thanks for joining us again. Certainly an interesting round of RDFNL football.
It was. We saw probably the biggest upset of the season so far, with Woodend getting over Diggers Rest, and probably a blowout we didn't expect as well. So a couple of interesting matches there, but otherwise I think the rest of the matches sort of went the way we thought they would.
Yeah, pretty much status quo in that department there. Let's look at the game that we were at, which was probably the unexpected blowout of the weekend. It was riddled just too good for Romsey at home.
It was sort of probably a little bit similar to the last time the two sides played in the finals last year. The Bombers just blew Romsey out of the park. So the margin in the end was only about your 60 points, but could have quite easily been 100 points. The Bombers didn't kick straight, which has been the story of their season so far. And Jamie Elliott said they've been practicing it. They even took the goalpost out at training and that sort of stuff.
Did they really?
They did. So they've been doing that. He said it's a lot of mental side of things, but it was a good win, and we're starting to see the Bombers we thought we would. They're now 3-3 after being 0-3. And it's their first win against a side that played finals last year.
And they certainly played. It was a very impressive four-quarter performance, which is probably one of the first times they've done that this year.
Yeah, and that's it. I think that was the most impressive thing. I think the last quarter, Romsey put a few men behind the ball, so that sort of slowed them down in that last quarter when the margin could have blown out, but it was probably their best performance of the year.
What does that say about Romsey at the moment?
Look, I think Romsey, we always knew they probably don't have the depth as some of those other sides, and even speaking to Corey pre-season, he said they know they're not quite up with those top sides, but when they play their best, they can match it, but they didn't play their best on the weekend, and that was the case. And we've sort of seen the gap between them and some of those top sides, and that was what sort of showed on the weekend.
Ben Way not playing definitely hurt the side. Unfortunately, it cost them goal-kicking power in more ways than one, because it ended up forcing Jack Jedwab to try and play a shutdown role on Ben Sonigan, who played basically all over the ground.
It is, and that hurts when you lose an experienced player, not only an experienced player, but a player with height. It always hurts on a very sunny day like it was out there, so Ben was a big loss for them. I think that we're missing a couple of other players as well, so it switches things around and does make it hard, but in the end, it was just the Bombers too good.
The big upset of the weekend, although if you're a fan of the club, it might not be an upset given the great form they've been showing, but Woodend Heskett too strong for Diggers Rest, ending a losing streak that is extended for about 10 seasons.
It is. That was massive up there for Woodend. I spoke to Tom Carland a couple of weeks ago when they were 3-0, and he said they wanted a scalp. They wanted either Diggers Rest or Rupert's Wood. So they had a streak. They had Romsey, Diggers Rest and Diggers Rest and Rupo, not Macedon, and they dropped the Romsey game, which I think they would have been disappointed with. They were probably a lot closer to Rupert's Wood than they have been the last couple of years, and then to knock off Diggers is a big one for them. There's a lot of confidence at that club, so it was a couple of the senior guys that really stood up at the end. Tom Wilson, Alistair Ray, two guys who have come in this season to the Hawks, but they've played in grand finals at other levels, so that sort of helps the side. And then you've got young Charlie Matheson, who is in some really good form. He was named best for the RDFL in the Interleague match, and then he was given the job on Taylor Hind on the weekend and managed to shut him down and restrict him, I think, to under 10 possessions.
That's fantastic. Great to see with young Charlie as well. Dominated in the extra time win in the under-18s match against Central Highlands, and to continue on that form, he did play some AFL Goldfields football, representative football last year as well. Just a good talent coming through, and I think that's what we're seeing with the Hawks. And I guess speaking of talent coming through, Wallen. They are flexing their muscles. They have taken down a team that has challenged. We've pumped up Melton Centrals a lot this year, but this is probably their worst performance of the year.
I think it is. And look, obviously, it was probably a four-quarter performance from the Magpies that we were sort of after. They've sort of struggled with that a little bit against sides that have been more competitive. They've had massive wins against those bottom sides, but it was a good four-quarter performance. After quarter time, they really dominated the game. As for Centrals, probably, as you said, their most disappointing performance of the game. First time this year, they haven't been in a contest at half time, so is that showing sort of the gap between them and the top sides? That possibly is what that show, but you've obviously got that. I think you had 13 different goal kickers for Wallen again, so they're really getting a good spread of players contributing, and
that's pretty standard on a week-to-week basis, where they are getting 15 plus goals, that they are sharing the workload around, and when you're getting guys like Sam Rex-Heppy, who is one of the predominant forwards in the competition potentially, he's a good lead-up forward, but he's not your leading goal kicker at that club, and they're able to kick more goals around him.
And it makes it hard to match up on, because if you shut one player down, you've got someone else that can stand up. So that makes them very dangerous come final time. And you've got a guy like Sam who can really step up when you need. You've got someone who can kick that 6, 7, 8 goals, but at the same time, you don't need him to every week.
Definitely right there. Sunbury Kangaroos back on the winners list, and after a big win over Lansfield.
It is. That was expected. So a lot of people, obviously, with Sunbury being a little bit disappointing with some injuries recently, and probably not getting the results they wanted. A loss to Melton Centrals is one of them. But yeah, they were dominant. You had Josh Bird just kick 8 up forward, and they had got a few players back. So it was sort of the performance that you sort of wanted to see from the Sunbury Kangaroos. Now they've had a couple of good wins. They are putting those lower sides to bed. Obviously, they did the same with Rockbank. Now it's about getting the wins against some of those other sides that are a little bit higher up the ladder.
And Lansfield, tough run for them at the moment.
It is. I think every week, most weeks, it's going to be a tough week for Lansfield, but it's about, obviously, for most of these guys, it's about having fun. It's getting the local aspect back into football, and that's happening. And that's happening, and that's what it is for this season. So obviously, it's going to mean there is going to be big losses, but at the same time, as long as they're having fun and they're learning and improving every week, that's the key for Lansfield.
Exactly, the guys definitely keep showing up. Rockbank, they've shown some promise in stages this year, but they faced a red-hot Rupert's Wood side that's had over 50 scoring shots and a big win.
It is. Look, it was another one you expected. We're sort of seeing that gap between Rupert's Wood and Rockbank. They haven't played each other, but Rupert's Wood has put just about every side to the sword.
They have.
And Rockbank has struggled, with the exception of them win against Broadford. So they have struggled a bit, but at the same time, Rupert's Wood is just dominant. And look, you've got 21 goals between Todd Podolzak and Cam McCrory.
Yep.
So that's massive. That's the second time I think this season that Todd's kicked 10 goals in a game. So he's thriving, especially we know RDF at the Interleague, he was best on ground there. So he's really thriving down there. I think those extra options up forward are really helping him. He was really good last year, but I think he's taken his game to an extra level. And probably the thing out of this game, obviously heading into it, thought, one-sided match. Was a couple of debutants for Rupert's Wood, which we added a bit to this. You have Brock Want, who, from all reports, is a gun. So his brothers both play for the Sunbury Lions in Dylan and Jack. And then we had Sean Crawford, who 2 years ago, was battling cancer. So he managed to play in an under-18s grand final that year. That he was one of 2 players to play in 3 straight for Rupert's Wood. And to come in and make his senior debut, I think it was a really good moment for the Rupert's Wood club.
And he's a handy player as well, very, very good player, hard worker.
He is. I think he would have made his debut a couple of years ago if he didn't get sick. So he was a very, very talented player. Even back then when I did a story on him, they rated him really highly. So it's good to see him get that opportunity, and it's showing that Rupert's Wood's got more young players to come through their system. Shows
that they're in an ideal place, and particularly for them, they've got a lot of one-point players coming through their senior team, and giving these under-18s, under-19s, and in recent years a chance to play senior footy and really earn their role.
It is, and that's what they've got, a lot of depth. So you've got players, they've had a lot of injuries to start the season, so they're not missing these senior guys. You've got other guys who are stepping up to the role, and they're not looking out of place. So it could come finals time that they've got a squad of 30 that they can pick from to play finals, and that's massive.
Speaking of massive, Macedon enjoyed a similar sort of win against Broadford, 53 scoring shots to 0. We haven't seen a scoreless performance all year, unfortunately, for Skip Bray and the boys of Broadford. It's a tough loss for them.
It was a tough day all round. Their reserves had to forfeit as well. So it obviously meant probably, I think, a few of Macedon's under-19s went back and played under-19s. A few of the reserves guys actually played seniors as well. So it meant Macedon switched a few things around. And different players got different opportunities. You've got Aaron Johnston in his first senior match of the year, kicked 5 goals, along with Matthew Knox. So Macedon sort of flexed their muscles, but it was a tough day for Broadford. And I think we've said this all season, it is going to be a tough season. It's just about improving and finding those positives, so these guys want to stay on and they want to keep playing as this club improves over the future. And their under-19s will play finals, there's no doubt about that. They've got some great talent in that list, and we'll expect great things from them going ahead for the remainder of the year. And that's the thing, they do have 19s coming through, where a lot of clubs don't have those juniors coming through, and that's where they struggle a bit. But to have those 19s coming through, they will come through into the reserves, into the seniors the next couple of years, and if they can keep that group together, they'll be a strong list in the future. Fantastic. Well, thanks to Ontime Delivery Solutions, and thanks to you, Tara. This has been the RDFNL Footy Show. Looking back on round 6, we look forward to catching up with you later on in the week. Thanks for having me.